Hey, I'm Connor Acosta, and today I'm going to be reviewing the movie The Last of the Mohicans. So, The Last of the Mohicans was a pretty fulfilling story, honestly, based on James Feinbohr's 1826 novel, I believe. It begins with Nathaniel, a white man adopted by the Mohican father, Chingachgook, and Uncas, Chingachgook's biological son. They are convening with some other white colonists when Jack Winthrop suggests they be recruited as militiamen for the British. The British promised to protect the men's homes while they were out fighting. However, the three decline due to the potential loss of their homes. So, General Duncan, he's a promising leader and he proposes to a woman named Cora, who's also British. They're both British. She declines taking his hand, which is quite unfortunate for him because she feels he's only a friend. Because the British couldn't enlist the Mohicans into the militia, they recruited Magua, who was a Huron guide, to assist them in their journey to provide reinforcements to Fort William Henry, which was currently under siege during some time. However, However, due to the lack of British judgment, Magua betrays them as he has placed a war party along the road which he chooses to travel on. This results in the death of every British person but General Duncan and two of the women, those being Cora and her sister Alice. The three Mohicans that I mentioned earlier turned out to be nearby and swiftly took out the members of the Huron war party with their superior combat skills, and due to the Huron's lack of ammo, which in Magua, I guess, yeah, resulted in Magua making a swift exit, I believe. And Nathaniel then promises the three that he would escort them to Fort William Henry because he's really just showing his kindness towards them, even if, I don't know, they didn't do anything for them. On the way to the fort, the group passes by the home in which Nathaniel and his family stayed the day prior, which had the white settlers, and it happened to be completely destroyed, which is really sad. There's a bunch of dead bodies all throughout, and yeah, Nathaniel, he ended up telling them that it was a war party, I believe, and that was due to the lack of looting and just all the bodies there with no proper burials. And the only reason, or the only time it would have ever been done by Europeans, it would have been looted because they're very greedy. So after this unfortunate event unfolds, where he finds the house, of course, they sneak past the siege that is currently going on Fort William Henry, delivering General Duncan as well as Cora and Alice to the fort, so their job is complete. They speak to Colonel Monroe, who is the father of Cora and Alice, who thanks them for their kindness. However, he then asks them for another favor, because why wouldn't he? Because the fort is under siege, they need reinforcements from General Webb, who was at the other camp that they previously came from, so he goes to send a message via a courier. He then asks them to assist the courier's safe passage through the woods, which they can provide due to their sniping abilities because they're highly experienced. On the way back, however, believe it or not, Nathaniel and Cora end up falling in love, of course, due to her new understanding of the native culture. Duncan gets really jealous of this. Is actually kind of insane. But so when Nathaniel tries describing what happened at their home to Monroe, Duncan just accuses him of lying and states that it's the Europeans rather than a war party. Monroe then states that the militia will not be allowed to leave because nothing actually happened that was bad according to them. And Cora states that she is disgusted by Duncan's actions, even though in a way I guess she kind of cheated on him, I guess. I'm not too sure. Despite Colonel Monroe's statement that he just gave them, Nathaniel ends up helping the militia escape the fort and return to their homes. This results in Monroe charging him with sedition and sentencing him to death by hanging. I know, that's real scary, right? Cora pleads for the release of Nathaniel, however, her father merely ignores her. However, before the execution, French General Montcalm offers to stop the siege in exchange for the British surrender. Monroe initially declines because he's like, we can hold off a little longer until the reinforcements arrive. However, Montcalm shows him that he actually has the courier's message, meaning the message was intercepted and no reinforcements are coming. And at that point, the colonel surrenders and the siege is over.
Monsieur le Marquis, I am deeply touched by such unusual and unexpected generosity. My fort is yours, under the condition that I be given till dawn to bury my dead.
Remember Magua? He was that guy that betrayed the British army earlier. So he was pretty furious that the British were not just absolutely destroyed and massacred. So he confronted the French general about it. He stated that his village and children were murdered by Monroe's troops, so Montcalm offers him a compromise. He states that the Huron can attack the British if they please, which is what he wanted. However, the French will not assist them in killing them because, they signed that treaty of, like how the other side surrendered, so he won't attack them. The British soldiers are then ambushed by the Huron, resulting in the Mohicans being able to escape the imprisonment, which, as you remember, he was gotten, sentenced to death by hanging. And General Duncan, Cora, and Alice get captured and taken to the Huron village instead of being, killed. After all that took place, Nathaniel uses clues such as broken branches or footsteps to find the village in which the three were captured because, he's still in love with Cora. Once he enters, though, however, he starts getting beaten by the Huron, people. However, he does not fight back and instead walks straight towards the chief while being beat, who at the time, I suppose, was conversing with Magua. Nathaniel, with the help of Duncan's translating, because they both spoke French, the Magua and the English, or I guess he was part French, because they needed to talk to the French general, stated that Magua's heart was pale and that his actions were his own interests rather than those of the tribe, which for the tribe was like a really big deal. Like, you cannot do that. It is not okay. The chief then created a compromise, promising Duncan to be let go, but Alice would have to become Magua's wife, and Cora had to be burned, like, alive. That sounds crazy, bro. Duncan then sacrificed himself instead of Cora, being burnt alive in the heart of the village. Nathaniel then shoots Duncan as he is burning alive to put him out of his misery. Of course, because why else would he shoot his friend? So Uncas, who had some feelings for Alice, as he had been caring for her throughout her journey, raced ahead to intercept Magua and his war party on the side of a mountain. He fought bravely, killing many of the Huron before encountering Magua face to face. Magua, with his superior combat skills, ends up killing Uncas, unfortunately, and then drops him off the mountain. Alice, being distraught by Magua's actions and, seeing her love getting dropped off the side of a mountain, that'd be pretty traumatizing, jumps off to join Uncas in the afterlife as well. Unfortunately, Nathaniel and his father both witnessed this and begin fighting the Huron one more time. Chingachgook goes straight for Magua as he wanted vengeance for the death of his son. He kills Magua and then yells that he is the last of the Mohicans. I know, that's so tough.
I, Chingachgook, last of the Mohicans.
Alright, now we're gonna start doing our little Q&A thing, because, why wouldn't we do that? Of course, we gotta answer all these questions, so... Let's get started. So, in which of the 9 historical periods would this movie be placed? I believe that this movie would be placed in period 3, because it takes place during the French and Indian War, which marks the beginning of period 3. How historically accurate is this movie, and some examples. So I'd say this movie is somewhat historically accurate, with events such as, the siege of Fort William Henry and the French allying with various tribes, as well as the attack on the retreating British troops. However, the three Mohicans in the movie were never actually real people that existed, and they were definitely not the last ones because they're still descendants today. Um, and yeah, so on to the next question. What new information did I learn from this movie? Honestly, I learned that the natives, yeah, they used guerrilla tactics to their advantage, especially whenever they knew the lay of the land. Okay, like it was really cool. I'll show you a scene in just a second, but I also learned that they combined the European guns with their close range fighting to become like really fierce fighters, and they destroyed them. It was actually kind of insane. But here, let me show you a clip. Okay, now that we got that clip out of the way, and I showed you guys that, here, let me get the last question. What questions about the historical moment in the movie trigger in your mind? Okay, I had one question in specific, and that was simply, how would the outcome of the siege on Fort William Henry have changed had the courier reached Brigadier General Webb? And honestly, I think that rather than turning the battle in favor of the British, because they have the extra reinforcements, it would simply just prolong the fort's eventual downfall and result in the death of, just even more people, which I think would be really unnecessary. So in a way, I'm kind of glad the courier didn't make it there. I mean, overall, I thought the movie was pretty good. I mean, you got these pictures of me watching it. The acting was great in the movie, and the storytelling with a historical appeal really made this movie stand out. Like Chef's Kiss. I would highly recommend this movie to anyone interested in the French and Indian War. Yeah, that's about all I have to say on this movie, so see ya, I guess. I mean, yeah.